Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on August 15th, 2025 for Reason to Resist. Here in Greece, August 15th is a major holiday. It's known as the Dormition of the Mother of God and is sometimes referred to as the Summer Easter. To all those who celebrate this day in the Christian world, I send you my best wishes. Today has also been designated as a day of rage in the occupied West Bank by Palestinian resistance groups. And in solidarity with the victims of Israel's ongoing genocide, we're devoting today's episode to recent developments in the Palestinian struggle for liberation. There is, of course, at least one other event of global significance taking place today, and that is the meeting or series of meetings between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump, scheduled to take place in the state of Alaska. Reason to Resist will cover that event tomorrow, August 16th, when I will interview John Helmer, the longest-serving foreign correspondent in Moscow. He's been a frequent guest on our program, generally attracts large audiences, and rightfully so, because he offers a penetrating insight into what's actually going on in international relations and within the Russian Federation's government. Now, returning then to the subject of Palestine, earlier this week, the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu lobbed a rhetorical grenade at Washington's Arab puppets. Have a look at this.
וזה אני רואה כמשימה גדולה. מה זה?
זה הוויז'ן שלי, זה אחד הדברים שחלמתי עליהם, מפת הארץ המובטחת.
יפה.
הגיע הזמן, קוראים לזה ירושלם. אני לא נותן את זה לך, אני מעניק את זה לך כדי שתיתן את זה לרעתך שרה.
תודה רבה.
אתה מתחבר לחזון?
מאוד.
באמת?
מאוד.
לישראל השלמה.
אם אתה שואל אותי, אנחנו כאן, אתה יודע, הרבה פעמים מזכיר את אבא שלי. הדור של ההורים שלי היה צריך להקים את המדינה. והדור שלנו, הדור שלי, צריך להבטיח את המשך קיומה. וזה אני רואה כמשימה גדולה.
So what happened there? Well, let's break this down. This was an exchange which aired on Israeli TV program I-24 News on Tuesday, August 12th. The interviewer, I understand, is Sharon Gal. Gal was briefly a right-wing member of the Knesset. And in the interview, Gal gives to Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, an amulet of what he describes as a map of the Promised Land. And apparently during the interview, he made some snide remark about, it being inappropriate to give the gift, the amulet, directly to Netanyahu as the prime minister. So he was giving it to the prime minister's war criminal wife instead. In any event, what did he mean by the Promised Land? Well, the book of Exodus describes the Promised Land as a land stretching from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea and from the desert to the Euphrates River, which lies in modern-day Iraq. The book of Exodus states, quote, "I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you." Close quote. The Promised Land is roughly synonymous with the more colloquial Greater Israel. On August 12th, the Times of Israel published an article about this exchange between Gal and Netanyahu. And in that article, the Times wrote as follows. The term Greater Israel was used after the Six-Day War of June 1967 to refer to Israel and the areas it had just conquered, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. The phrase was used also by some early Zionists, including Zev Jabotinsky, forerunner of Netanyahu's Likud party, to refer to present-day Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, and present-day Jordan. Now, what the Times of Israel failed to mention is that there is an even broader definition of Greater Israel. And I'm showing to you here a map which I obtained from Wikipedia, which shows the breadth of this state. And as you can see, it not only includes, the Sinai, it also includes a chunk of land on the western side of the Nile River in Egypt. It includes Jordan. It includes a significant swath of Saudi Arabia, northern Saudi Arabia, probably about half of Iraq, almost all, or at least 2/3 of Syria, I would say, and the entirety of Lebanon, and even a small chunk of Turkey. That's quite a bite out of an apple, I should say. And therefore, one could imagine that the statement by Netanyahu that he's absolutely committed to this dream of a greater Israel is likely to cause considerable consternation amongst various of the Arab puppets, or Washington's Arab puppets in West Asia. Now, I think we should go back and just watch this exchange again so you can understand my interpretation of it.
וזה אני רואה כמשימה גדולה. מה זה?
זה הוויז'ן שלי, זה אחד הדברים שחלמתי עליהם, מפת הארץ המובטחת.
יפה.
הגיע הזמן, קוראים לזה ירושלם. אני לא נותן את זה לך, אני מעניק את זה לך כדי שתיתן את זה לרעתך שרה.
תודה רבה.
אתה מתחבר לחזון?
מאוד.
באמת?
מאוד.
זה ישראל השלמה.
Now let's just pause there. So you can see that this amulet is in a box. And after receiving the box, Netanyahu places it back down on the table in front of him without opening it. And the camera zooms in on the box just to make sure people can see the box. And at no point during this exchange, at no point during the interview, does Netanyahu actually reveal what's in the box. And he's undoubtedly aware that there is significant ambiguity around the term Promised Land or Greater Israel. And by not taking out of the box the amulet that he has just been given, he's going to leave, he must undoubtedly be aware that he's going to leave doubt in the minds of people who are watching and listening to this exchange, exactly what it is that he is committed to. What are the borders of this promised land for which he is professing so much commitment in this moving exchange with the right-wing Gal. Predictably, Netanyahu's comments provoked a furious but toothless reaction from Washington's Arab puppets. The Jordanian foreign ministry called Netanyahu's comments, quote, a dangerous and provocative escalation, close quote, that threatens the sovereignty of states and violates the UN Charter. Qatar's foreign ministry said the comments reflect, quote, the occupation's approach based on arrogance, fueling crises and conflicts, and blatantly infringing the sovereignty of states, close quote. Saudi Arabia rejected what it called, quote, expansionist ideas and projects, and it reaffirmed the historical and legal right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent sovereign state on their lands, close quote. Now, in my view, what you've just witnessed from Netanyahu and Gal was staged. And I say that because, first of all, at no point does Netanyahu seem surprised by the gift. At no point does he seem discomforted by the question that is being put to him, which he knows very well is an explosive question. The camera conveniently zooms in on that box, which Netanyahu leaves in front of him so that everybody can see it and ponder in their own minds what exactly he means by Greater Israel. The whole thing, frankly, just had the stink of a staged exchange. And the key question would be, if my interpretation of this is correct, is why did Netanyahu stage this exchange at this particular point in time? Well, one possible explanation is that Netanyahu is trying to placate Israel's far right at a moment when the far right is expressing significant dissatisfaction with Netanyahu's ever-shifting plans for the Gaza Strip. Just 2 days before this theatrical display on I-24 News, Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, blasted Netanyahu by saying that he no longer believes Netanyahu is willing to do what it takes to win the so-called war in Gaza. But there might also be another reason why Netanyahu did this. And this reason, and the one that I just stated, these are not mutually exclusive. These could all be, motivating Netanyahu to engage in this staged event. What Netanyahu may be doing here is setting the table, so to speak, For Israel's ultimate conquest of Arab lands outside of historic Palestine and the Golan Heights, which Israel has already illegally annexed some decades ago after occupying or beginning the occupation of the Syrian Golan Heights in 1967. What I mean by setting the table is that he may be trying to normalize the idea of Greater Israel, the most expansive concept of Greater Israel. And perhaps he's testing the waters to see how his Western backers will react to his stated intention, or at least implicit intention, to conquer and steal lands that lie outside of historic Palestine and the Golan Heights. It's vital to understand that for decades, Israel has played a sinister game of pushing the envelope. With each passing year, it becomes increasingly brutal and aggressive. And when Israel's leaders see that they face no consequences for this latest savagery, whatever it may be, they escalate their barbarism. They escalate their aggression, again, testing the boundaries of what they can get away with. And I would suggest to you that that is likely what is happening now with Netanyahu's declaration of support for Greater Israel. Although I believe that this interview was staged, I don't doubt for one second Netanyahu's commitment to the idea of a Greater Israel, although he might have been less obvious in the past about his support for the concept of Greater Israel than he was in this particular exchange on I-24 News. His actions from the very beginning of his political career have made clear to objective, informed observers where his sympathies lie. And no one should have any doubt that if Western governments continue to arm, enrich, and protect Israel as it carries out daily massacres of Palestinians and relentless attacks on Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, then it's only a matter of time before Israel seeks to conquer new lands that lie well beyond the borders of historic Palestine. And where will that ultimately lead? Ultimately, it will lead to Israel's destruction. For nearly 2 years, Israel has used the most extreme forms of violence to defeat resistance groups from Palestine to Yemen, yet it has defeated none of them. Its army is exhausted, its weapon stocks are depleted, its international standing has been destroyed, its economy severely weakened, its Jewish population reduced substantially by the exodus of Israelis who have had enough of Israel's wars. If Israel has paid so high a price to achieve so little, how can it hope to survive an expanded war of conquest against neighboring Arab states? The truth is that Israel's leaders are drunk on power, and like any drunken sailor, one day they'll end up broke, lying in the gutter with a massive hangover and begging for handouts from passers-by. This brings me to a recent article by Trita Parsi, the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute. I've previously interviewed Trita on Reason to Resist. Trita has just authored an article, the headline of which I'm showing you here, which was published in Foreign Policy magazine on August 11th. And his article begins with these words, quote, "Israel is likely to launch another war with Iran before December, perhaps even as early as late August. Iran is expecting and preparing for the attack. It played the long game in the first war, pacing its missile attacks as it anticipated a protracted conflict. In the next round, however, Iran is likely to strike decisively from the outset, aiming to dispel any notion that it can be subdued under Israeli military dominance. As a result, the coming war will likely be far bloodier than the first. If US President Donald Trump caves to Israeli pressure again and joins the fight, the United States could face a full-blown war with Iran that will make Iraq look easy by comparison." Trita then explains why he's convinced that Israel will revive its war of aggression against Iran before the end of 2025. His arguments are compelling. I suggest that you read the article. It was not behind a paywall when I tried to access it, although foreign policy's articles generally are behind a paywall. These arguments that he articulates, by the way, are perfectly consistent with the stated and long-standing desire of Israel's leaders to destroy Iran's ability to resist Western domination of the region of West Asia. Now, before I move on, I just want to say that I do take exception with one thing Trita said in that excerpt that I read from you. I don't think that Donald Trump capitulated to Israeli pressure when he bombed Iran. I think that was the plan all along if Israel got into trouble, and Israel was clearly in serious trouble. But that is a minor point relative to the larger question of whether Israel will revive its criminal war of aggression on the Islamic Republic. And I think that, Trita Parsi's analysis is absolutely correct, although the timeline for this may be somewhat less aggressive than the one that he indicates in his article, namely late August to the end of 2025. If Israel revives its war on Iran, which seems virtually inevitable, it's likely to suffer catastrophic damage far beyond what it has suffered thus far. Iran has demonstrated its capacity to penetrate Israel's air defenses and, just as importantly, to strike high-value targets within the genocidal entity with precision. Therefore, another round of Israel's war in Iran is likely to accelerate the departure of Israeli Jews from historic Palestine. And as I've said many times, going all the way back to November of 2023, shortly after this genocidal rampage began, that is how I believe this war will ultimately end. It will end in Israel losing what it has termed in its racist fashion for many years as the demographic war. Now, in another sign that Israel's leaders are incapable of restraint, Israel's Minister of Finance, Smotrich, just announced another huge expansion of the illegal settlement project in the occupied West Bank. Smotrich, we are told, plans to build more than 3,000 homes in a settlement project that will, quote, bury the idea of a Palestinian state, close quote. The so-called E1 project between Jerusalem and the illegal Mal Adumim settlement has been frozen for decades amid fierce opposition internationally, this reported by the BBC. Building there would effectively cut off the West Bank from occupied East Jerusalem, which Israel has also illegally annexed. And East Jerusalem, up until now, has been remarkably quiet, I would say, understandably, in one sense, because, of course, the Palestinians, the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, understand what fate awaits them if they were to rise up against Israel. And I can attest to the restraint they have shown, because I was in East Jerusalem for a number of days in the first half of 2024. And although there were some visible signs of resistance, particularly around the entrances to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the level of resistance that was on display was significantly less intense than the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So will this be the match that ignites that fire? It's entirely possible, but whether it is or it isn't, there is a fire coming in East Jerusalem, my friends, because Israel, as I've argued many times in the past, is not going to stop at the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Were it to succeed in that regard, and I don't believe it will, it would then escalate its ethnic cleansing within the West Bank, which is well underway, and then turn its sights on the Palestinian population of East Jerusalem, and finally seeking to complete its project of the ethnic cleansing of the entirety of historic Palestine. It would then turn to the Palestinian population of 1948, Israel itself. Now, what I find most, frankly, aggravating about this latest news that Smotrich has announced this extraordinarily provocative settlement project, and one which is flagrantly illegal, is that he and the other so-called far-right minister in Netanyahu's cabinet, let's be clear here, every member of Netanyahu's cabinet is far-right. Some are simply more far-right than others. There are no moderates in that cabal of war criminals. But what's most annoying about all of this is that several weeks ago, the Canadian government, the British government, I believe it was, there were 7 Western governments imposed pathetically weak sanctions on Smotrich and Ben-Gvir after they put out a warning that they were going to impose sanctions and take concrete actions if Israel did not cease its relentless expansion of settlements in the West Bank and provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And as I said at the time, there was absolutely no prospect that those sanctions, because they were so weak and they were only limited to Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are probably the most fanatical members of Netanyahu's cabinet, there was no prospect that this was actually going to moderate their behavior in any meaningful way. And this announcement that they are now going to revive the Israelis, a highly controversial and provocative settlement project in the West Bank that is lying dormant for years because of the intense opposition to the project, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the sanctions that have been imposed upon Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are completely ineffectual. And so I think we can now say with a high degree of confidence that these measly sanctions were just another chapter in the ongoing kabuki theater of Western governments who are trying desperately to persuade their increasingly indignant constituents that they're doing something meaningful to put a stop to this satanic genocide in occupied Palestine. Western governments, to sum it all up, are going to have to impose far broader and far more severe sanctions on Israel to put an end to its criminality. So, and just to be clear about what that would look like, it would mean suspending or terminating outright all trade agreements with Israel and depriving Israeli businesses of the various benefits, trade benefits that they are accorded under these various trade agreements, including the EU-Israel Association Agreement and the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement. It would involve a complete legislated arms embargo on Israel. Okay, what do I mean by legislated? I mean that Western governments adopt laws which declare it to be a criminal offense to sell or deliver any military equipment to Israel or to any Israeli corporation, period. And also makes it a criminal offense to purchase any military equipment from any Israeli corporation. Only if a law which explicitly criminalizes the arms trade with Israel were put into effect could you be confident that the arms trade between Israel and your government has come to an end. What has happened up until now is that using wishy-washy language, some Western governments, including the Canadian government and the British government, and most recently the German government, have said that they are suspending until further notice the issuance of permits for the export of military equipment to Israel that can be used in Gaza. Okay, so, they could, because this is not a law, because they haven't actually criminalized this, they've just claimed to suspend the issuance of permits authorizing the delivery of military equipment to Israel. They could be quietly issuing these permits at any point in time without violating any laws. And given their utterly dishonest behavior when it comes to Israel, you simply can't trust them to keep their word that they're not going to issue any such permits. But the big problem with these announcements is that they are confined, as I've explained in the past, to what these governments describe as weapons that can be used in Gaza. And they never explain what that means. What is the difference between a weapon that can be used in Gaza and a weapon that can be used in the West Bank or in Lebanon or in Syria or in Yemen? If it can be used in any of those places, then as a technological matter, it can certainly be used in Gaza, which leads one to believe that what they mean by can be used in Gaza is that they have granted permission to the Israelis to use the weapon in Gaza. And the problem here is, if what Western governments are doing is relying upon assurances from Israel that it's not using military equipment transferred to Israel from their jurisdictions in Gaza, well, that is utterly meaningless. Israel simply cannot be relied upon to keep those assurances. If it's willing to commit a genocide, surely it's willing to lie to its military equipment suppliers about what it's doing with the weapons it acquires from them. I mean, they've even gone so far, the Israelis, as to kill people who are citizens of Western states, including American citizens. So you think they're not willing to lie to Western governments about what they're doing with military equipment that has been provided to them? So to say it again, a real program of sanctions on Israel would include, at a bare minimum, not only the suspension or termination of trade agreements with Israel, but also laws criminalizing the transfer of military equipment to Israel and also the purchase of military equipment from Israel. A minimally effective program of sanctioning Israel would also subject citizens of Western countries who serve in Israel's genocidal military to criminal prosecution in the domestic courts of Western states. And furthermore, a minimum program of effective sanctions would terminate charitable status for all organizations based in the West that are funneling money to Israel, and in particular to Israel's military industrial complex. Anything less than that is nothing but a charade, my friends. And it's a charade that is responding to the growing public pressure on Israel to put a stop to its mass slaughter of Palestinians. Turning then to the subject of the growing pressure in the West for governments to act against Israel's genocidal regime, in Germany, the polling firm ARD Deutschland Trend released a new poll on August 7th, a day before the German chancellor's announcement that Germany was suspending the provision of military equipment to Israel, quote, that can be used in Gaza. On the day before that announcement, this poll is released by Deutschland Trend, and it showed that 66% of Germans want their government to put more pressure on Israel to change its behavior. That figure, 66%, is higher than the result yielded when that question was put to Germans in April 2024. At that time, some 57% of respondents said they believe their government should criticize Israel more strongly than before for its actions in the Gaza Strip. The ARD Deutschland Trend poll also found that 47% of Germans think their government is doing too little for Palestinians in Gaza, against 39% who say that Germany is doing enough. Most strikingly, however, 62% of respondents in the new poll now disagree with the statement that Germany has a bigger responsibility for Israel due to Germany's history of committing a genocide against the Jewish people. The poll found that only 31% of Germans now agree with that proposition, which has been a core tenet of German foreign policy for decades. So this ludicrous idea that the way for the German people to atone for their unspeakable atrocities against the Jewish people in World War II is for them to support the commission of another set of atrocities by Jewish Israelis in the contemporary era. This ludicrous idea has now been largely discredited in Germany, and that is going to have profoundly negative consequences for Israel's relationship with Germany going forward. Why does that matter so much? Well, Germany until now has supplied about 30% of Israel's imports of military equipment, and of all the states that have lent staunch support to Israel over the years, Germany is probably the second most powerful of them after the United States. In Europe, Israel's standing has fallen so low that even the Union of European Football Associations, or UEFA, has entered the discussion about Israel's crimes. On August 13th, UEFA held the Super Cup in Udine, Italy. This was a match between the winner of the Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain, and the winner of the Europa Cup, Tottenham Hotspurs from the United Kingdom. Days before the match, Israel murdered Suleiman al-Obaid, known as the Palestinian Pele. Al-Obaid was killed by an Israeli air attack on civilians waiting for humanitarian aid in the southern Gaza Strip. Following his death, UEFA issued a tribute to al-Obaid on social media, but without mentioning Israel's involvement in his death. In a brief post on X, UEFA called the former national team member, quote, a talent who gave hope to countless children, even the darkest of times, close quote. That provoked a rare response from Mohamed Salah, a world-famous Egyptian player from the Liverpool Football Club. Salah responded to the UEFA tweet on X, writing, quote, "Can you tell us how he died, where, and why?" Close quote. Stung by the criticism, UEFA chose to display a large banner at the Super Cup in Italy. The banner read, "Stop killing children, stop killing Palestinians." And here you can see an image of the banner just before the match begins. To my knowledge, this is the first time that UEFA has made any reference in its public commentary to the killing of children and other civilians in the Gaza Strip. Although here it did not actually do that explicitly. It did not make any explicit reference to the Gaza Strip or to Israel in the banners that were displayed. Now, UEFA has stayed silent for nearly 2 years, despite being pressured intensely by football fans and Palestinian solidarity activists to expel Israeli teams from UEFA competitions. And that is something to this very day, to its utter disgrace, that UEFA refuses to do. Just contemplate this. On February 28th, 2022, 6 days after the Russian Federation launched its invasion into Ukraine, an invasion, by the way, which was unquestionably provoked by years, if not decades, of Western aggressive meddling in the internal affairs of Ukraine. On that day, 6 days, a mere 6 days after the invasion began, UEFA expelled from its European competitions all Russian teams. Now, here we are, nearly 2 years into this genocide. Israel has massacred far more civilians in the Gaza Strip than the Russians have killed in the Ukraine war. The number, the last time I checked, a couple of weeks ago, of the civilians killed in the Ukraine war was modestly north of 10,000 persons. And those persons, by the way, were not all killed by Russian forces. An unknown number of them were actually killed by the Ukrainian military. And that number, something modestly north of 10,000, is a small fraction of the, tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians who have been killed by Israel in the Gaza Strip. And that number now may actually be, as per the Lancet and various other experts, well north of 100,000 or even north of 200,000. That's how many people Israel may well have killed in the Gaza Strip up until now. So it's however you slice it, even if you take the most conservative number, the one that has been put out by the Gaza Health Ministry, which puts the total death toll at something in the range of 62,000 persons, the vast majority of whom are women and children, that is still a number of killed civilians, which is greatly in excess of the number that have been killed in the Ukraine war, even though the Ukraine war began 18 months approximately before Israel's genocidal rampage in Gaza. And what makes this particularly galling, the attitude of UEFA towards all of this, is that Israel isn't even in Europe. Why is Israel participating in any of UEFA's European football competitions? They've expelled Russian teams that come from a country that is part of Europe and have kept in the competitions in Europe Israeli teams that come from a country that are not part of Europe and whose crimes vastly surpass any crimes that can be attributed to the Russian Federation, even if you believe everything that has been alleged against Russia during the course of this war, and much of it was either hyperbole or outright fabrication. Even if you assume that it's all true, Israel's crimes are still vastly worse than those that Russia is alleged to have committed. And yet here we are today, even after UEFA has become embarrassed by its inaction, Israeli football clubs continue to be permitted to participate in European football competitions. And for the record, I happen to be a great fan of football, not the American-Canadian variety, which I have no interest in watching because of its brutal violence. I have been a football fan all my life. I actually once came quite close to having a career as a footballer when I was a young man. And, my favorite team, for the record, is Barcelona. And over the years, I've paid significant money to go and watch Barcelona matches in person, but I will not watch and have not watched, attended a single game, purchased a single ticket to attend a UEFA football match, whether it involves Barcelona or any other football club, because of my indignation that UEFA refuses to expel Israeli teams from its competition. Any of you out there who are listening and who happen to be fans, as I am, of European football, I humbly request and urge you to stop spending your money on the Union of European Football Associations until they finally do the right thing. Now, of course, it's not just in Europe where Israel's standing has been demolished. As I reported last week, polls in the US and Canada show a dramatic decline in support for Israel. There is, in fact, a new one that is out in Canada, which shows that a majority of Canadians support Palestine recognition, even if Trump objects amid trade dispute. So let me unpack that for you. After Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced weeks ago that his government intended to recognize the state of Palestine, US President Donald Trump threatened Canada by saying that Canada's stance could make a trade deal, quote, very hard to achieve. This is a serious matter for Canada because the United States is by far Canada's largest trading partner. And in early August, the polling firm asked Canadians whether their government, the polling firm Angus Reid, asked Canadians whether their government should recognize Palestine even if the Trump administration objects. And 63% of survey respondents said yes. Only 20% of Canadians said they thought that the nation should reverse course to safeguard trade relations with the United States. Another 17% of respondents said they were unsure. Why is this so important? What's so important about this poll is that it shows not only that a large majority of Canadians care about Palestinian statehood, but that they're even willing to pay a price to ensure that their government does the right thing, an economic price. You know, a lot of people out there in Canada and in countries around the West, if you look at the polls, are clearly sympathetic and increasingly so to the Palestinian cause, but it has not affected, up until now, meaningfully and demonstrably their choices at the ballot box. They seem to have been prioritizing other issues because they continue to elect governments that are supportive of Israel. But if Canadians are now willing to take an economic hit in order to ensure that their government does the right thing and finally recognizes the state of Palestine, that suggests that Palestinian human rights have moved up their list of priorities significantly and may very well begin to affect their decisions at the ballot box in a huge way. And this is something I am absolutely confident Western governments are aware of, and they're becoming increasingly concerned about it, those who are in power. And this will inevitably begin to affect, as it already has, the nature and extent of their support for Israel's genocidal entity. Now, for Israel, there's plenty of additional bad news. For decades, the most influential Canadian supporter of Israel has been Irwin Cotler, a former Canadian Justice Minister for the current ruling party, the Liberal Party of Canada. Let me tell you how revered this charlatan Irwin Cotler is in Canada. Back in 2019, when Irwin Cotler was being feted by Concordia University in Montreal as a human rights champion, I disrupted Cotler as he was speaking to an adoring audience. And you can see here up on the screen, this was an article published in June 2019 by the Electronic Intifada. The article included a video of my disruption. I'm standing on the stage to the right of Cotler, who's seated down on the armchair to my right. At the time, the reason why I disrupted that event, and I wasn't alone, I was also joined in the disruption by author and activist Eve Engler, who's currently running for the leadership of the NDP, and I've interviewed Eve a number of times on this program. And we were joined by a handful of other Palestinian solidarity activists. Our disruption, even though it was entirely peaceful, caused a firestorm of controversy because as I was standing beside Kotler on the stage where he was speaking, I told the audience that Kotler, who has long presented himself as a world-renowned champion of human rights, is a fraud. That's the word I used. Now, Canada's political elite was so incensed by our disruption of Kotler that the largest political parties in Canada's parliament denounced us for this intervention. And here you can see an article that appeared in the Canadian Jewish News on June 7th, 2019. And it reads as follows: members of parliament from all parties joined in a show of solidarity with Erwin Kotler after learning that pro-Palestinian protesters disrupted him while he was speaking at Concordia University on June 3rd. In the House of Commons 3 days after the incident, MPs gave Kotler, a former Liberal Justice Minister and Attorney General, a standing ovation during question period. The applause followed a question by Conservative MP David Sweet on whether the government would, quote, condemn this attack on the free speech of one of Canada's top human rights defenders, close quote. Sweet noted that Kotler has been outspoken in the defense of tyrannized minorities and political prisoners around the world. Liberal MP Robert Oliphant, the Parliamentary Secretary to Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland, responded by saying that the government and the entire House stand with Kotler and that the government would convey that to him. So yes, that was the reaction. I and Eve Engler and a handful of other activists were accused in Canada's Parliament of suppressing Mr. Kotler's right to speak freely. The ludicrous aspect of this, I mean, it's absurd in so many ways, particularly the claim that Kotler, the most outspoken and influential Zionist in Canada, is a champion of human rights. One of the things that's ludicrous about this parliamentary reaction is that we didn't actually deprive Mr. Kotler of his right to speak at all. What happened was that we disrupted the event for a few minutes, and then we were ushered out of the venue. And we left willingly, by the way. We didn't put up any kind of a fight. We were ushered out of the venue, and the event continued. And Kotler continued to speak about his, fraudulent record on human rights to the adoring audience without any impediment after we, had an opportunity to express our own views. And the whole reason, by the way, why we engage in these disruptions, as I've explained before, is because the mainstream media, so-called mainstream media in Canada and other Western states, marginalizes pro-Palestinian voices. So we would be happy. I'd be happy to be invited onto, Canada's national broadcaster or CTV News or Global Television in Canada, where before I became an outspoken and a defender of the Palestinian cause, I was invited to speak on many occasions. I've been on Canadian television on numerous occasions to talk about my legal work as a class actions lawyer, about stuff that had nothing to do with Israel. But these same media organizations that invited me onto their programs again and again or sought my commentary repeatedly about legal developments unrelated to Israel have zero interest in hearing about what I have to say about the Palestinian cause. So that's why we engage in these peaceful disruptions. And at the end of the day, we're not depriving anybody of their right to speak freely. Now, so ludicrous was so over the top was the reaction to this that some Canadian Zionists even created a hashtag, Stand with Kotler, to show their support for this pro-Israel hack. Well, guess what, folks? Canada's most influential apologist for Israel's barbaric regime has just signed an open letter, along with thousands of other Jewish persons, calling on Netanyahu to end the war on Gaza and end the starvation of Palestinians. And here you can see an article by the Canadian press, which this was published on August 13th, which highlights Kotler's decision to join with these thousands of other Jewish persons in demanding an end to the killing in Gaza and to the starvation of the Palestinian population. So this article begins by describing Kotler as a, quote, longtime human rights activist, close quote, and a, quote, staunch supporter of Israel, close quote. Here's a newsflash for the Canadian press. You cannot be a human rights activist and a staunch supporter of Israel at the same time. These things are mutually exclusive. The Canadian press also says that Kotler, quote, has faced death threats from Iran over his support for the Jewish state and democracy worldwide, close quote. This, by the way, is total nonsense. What happened a few months ago in the lead up to the criminal war of aggression by the United States and Israel on Iran is that the Canadian intelligence services, who routinely try to manipulate public opinion in Canada without any credible objective evidence to support their allegations, they said they had reason to believe that Iran was, contemplating or planning to assassinate Erwin Kotler. Now, not only was there absolutely no credible evidence to support this allegation, and it happened to fit very nicely into the narrative that Western intelligence agencies and governments were developing to support an attack on Iran, but it just flew in the face of common sense. I mean, Kotler is, he's retired now, and he is not a minister in the government. He isn't even a sitting member of parliament. He doesn't hold political office. He has no political power. And by assassinating him, the Islamic Republic would accomplish absolutely nothing in terms of altering Canada's attitude towards Iran. In fact, it would certainly result in Canada becoming even more belligerent towards Iran. In fact, it would result in all Western states becoming more belligerent towards Iran. And I can't imagine that the Islamic Republic's leadership thinks that this would be a useful expenditure of their time, energy, and money, forming some plan to take out Erwin Kotler. So frankly, this is just more of the mythology that surrounds Erwin Kotler. But the main point here, of course, is that this lifetime staunch supporter of Israel has now put his name on this letter. The other interesting aspect of this is that one of those persons who added his signature to this letter is Canadian-American billionaire Charles Bronfman, also a staunch supporter of Israel for essentially his entire life. Bronfman has been, he's one of the founders of the Birthright program, which sends Jewish youths on trips to Israel in order to propagandize them into becoming Zionists. Now, this letter which Kotler and Bronfman signed includes statements such as this, quote, "The policies and rhetoric of the government you lead," and this is addressed to Netanyahu, "are doing lasting damage to Israel, its standing in the world, and the prospects of secure peace for all Israelis and Palestinians. This has severe consequences for Israel, but also for the well-being, security, and unity of Jewish communities around the world," close quote. The letter, organized by a group called the London Initiative, calls Israel's aid restrictions on Gaza, quote, "a moral and strategic disaster that hands a propaganda victory to Hamas and undermines the important work of countering Hamas and Iran." The letter also calls out Israel's failure to suppress settler violence, which it says has helped fuel the current diplomatic tsunami of criticism from Israel's historical peers. Now, I've never seen anything like this from either Kotler or Bronfman, and I've paid fairly careful attention to their public commentary about Israel over the years because of the influence they have with respect to this subject in Canada and internationally. And let's be clear here, folks. There's no reason to believe that Kotler and Bronfman have suddenly grown a conscience about the Palestinian people. They never gave a damn about Palestinians, and they never will give a damn about Palestinians. What has provoked their alarm, and this is amply borne out by the language of their open letter, is the damage that Netanyahu's psychopathic policies are doing to Israel's standing in the world. So for the first time in my many years of Palestinian solidarity activism, I find myself agreeing with Kotler and Bronfman on this issue. Israel's political elite has destroyed Israel's international standing. But unlike Kotler and Bronfman, I do not believe, as I presume they do, that Israel's reputation can be rehabilitated if it were to stop the genocide now, nor can the standing of Zionism be rehabilitated. The hands of Zionists are drenched in the blood of Palestinian children, and nothing will ever wash that blood away, Mr. Kotler. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on August 15th, 2025.